Hello, everybody, and welcome again to the latest in our series of Pi webinars. Thanks for joining us from all around the world. So nice to have so many of you here, including Vicky from the English countryside, hopefully somewhere near me. So my name's Amy Baker, and I am joined today by three panelists who are going to be teaching us all about secure e-assessments. You may be a tech evangelist. You may know lots about technology in higher ed and how to deliver assessments remotely, or you may be like me, just coming along and learning as we go. But I think you will hopefully leave this hour certainly enlightened and with some new ideas about how exams and assessments can be adopted in university settings. So please welcome my panelists. I've got Joey Morrison here, who's General Manager for Catalyst IT Europe. Hi, Joey.
Hi, Amy. Thank you.
I've got Mark Glynn, who's the head of the Teaching Enhancement Unit at DCU in Ireland. Hi, Mark.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. How are you?
And Esther Wilkinson, who's head of International at JISC.
Hi, folks.
And I'm going to ask all three of them just to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about their roles before I fire some questions at them. Just a reminder, we would love you to ask some questions. This event is for you, so please use the Ask a Question function at the bottom of the screen. You can either vote for other people's questions or you can ask your own, but I certainly will be coming to those questions later on during this hour and addressing them to our panelists. We also have polls, so it would be lovely to hear from you on the polls and where you are in terms of dealing with online assessments, what you're thinking, what your pain points are. I've just had a quick look now, and it looks like 85% of you are likely, although not certain, that you will be using online e-assessment solutions for the next period. So like me, you're here to learn a lot and maybe make your mind up about where to go from here. So do keep answering the questions and the polls. And meanwhile, I'm going to come to Joey first. Joey, tell us more about Catalyst IT Europe and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Jamie Wilson, General Manager of Catalyst IT, our Europe department, but we are a global organization founded around 20 years ago, and we have spent the past 20 years furthering open source technologies for the benefit of end users. And in particular, we focus on e-learning technologies and tooling, and a platform that many of you will probably be familiar with is Moodle LMS, which we have spent roughly 16 years enhancing, furthering, supporting, and driving forward. In that time, we're roughly responsible for about 20% of the code and the feature set within Moodle. And of late, we have seen the demand for online assessment platforms or online assessment solutions increasing. Before COVID, but certainly post-COVID, this has become critical to the success of many of you in your various institutions and settings. And it is for this reason that we have been rolling out, supporting and delivering solutions for e-assessment with Moodle at their heart, whilst wrapping a suite of services around those solutions to ensure that not only does the tech stack up, but also that the end user experience and the overall result is exactly what's expected and what's needed.
Great, thanks. Is it fair to say you've been busier than ever in the last few months?
Yeah, it's been very, very busy. Not only have the phone lines been blowing off the hook, but we have also been delivering rapidly for some of our partners in these new and testing times.
Great. Well, let's go to you, Mark. You're one of those institutions rapidly pivoting, acting like a swan, paddling underneath. Tell us about what you do in your role at DCU and what the last few months have been like.
Yeah, we have been one of those customers of Joey, keeping them busy, keeping them off the street corners, and definitely putting his services to the test. And I'm delighted to say he passed with flying colours. I work for Dublin City University. I head up what we call the Teaching Enhancement Unit. It's our centre for teaching and learning within the university. And the last few months have been interesting, to say the least. Very, very challenging, no more challenging than everybody else that's joined us here throughout the webinar. From our perspective, we're not only in charge of the teaching and learning side of the house, but also the learning technologies. We made a purposeful decision to manage the two in one and make sure that we always lead with the pedagogy rather than just the technology. But that, of course, brings double the responsibility to go with it. So we're responsible for all the learning technologies across the university and the professional staff development associated with them and general teaching and learning as well. So, yeah, we're
right. And how big's your team?
not big enough, if I'm honest. But if we were counting FTE, so full-time equivalents, we have 6 people on board. So we have 2,000 staff, 18,000, just shy of 18,000 students spread across 3 campuses. So we do have a couple of part-timers in there as well, but 6 FTEs, 6 full-time.
Okay. Great. Well, we'll find out more about what you've been doing, but I'd like to hear from Esther first. Esther, for those who aren't familiar with JISC, let's give us a quick overview, please, of what you do.
Yeah, sure. We are, first of all, JISC doesn't stand for anything. It used to stand for the Joint Information Systems Committee, but it doesn't stand for that anymore. So that's the first question out of the way. We are a national research and education network, which means we connect all of our universities and all of our colleges by a physical network, as well as providing services and support on top of that. So we run something called the Janet Network, which is one of the best high-speed networks in the world. As I say, we connect all of our members, our universities and colleges, and it's our vision for the UK to be the most digitally advanced higher and further education nation in the world, but also within that working in partnership. We also do sector-wide deals, so we aggregate demand of our sector and negotiate with people like Microsoft, Amazon to get the best deals, but also publishers such as Wiley and Oxford University Press. So we negotiate on behalf of our sector. We are a large organisation. We're nearly 900 strong now. And across that, we provide lots of expert advice and guidance in the digital sphere.
And have you, has your team been busy with e-assessment, and is this, do you think, a particular issue right now, given that students are stuck everywhere?
We've seen from the international side a real specific need for students that have been repatriated in their home countries that need to not only have end-of-year exams, but also pre-sessional courses before the start of next year. So there's those 2 elements to the things that we've seen in the last few months. Okay, so Joey, I'm going to come to you on this one. I am keen to learn all about e-assessments and how you can ensure they're secure. So that was my first question to you. How do you at Catalyst make sure, work with your university partners and provide some sort of security around the fact that they are secure?
Yeah, so there's a lot of layers to this question, and actually it's about getting the right balance for the partners that we've got and for their end users. And I'm going to draw on a couple of examples, but first and foremost, the application, the platform that you're utilizing has to be securely put together and securely maintained and living on secure and well managed infrastructure and services. And we partner with AWS for some of that, for all of that. And we use Moodle, as I mentioned earlier, which is, many a myth that open source software is insecure. It's totally incorrect. That's a total myth. And you should get rid of that idea if that is something you hear. Beyond that, there's the actual examination security and the authenticity, and how can you verify that the candidate is who they say they are and that they are completing the exam in a secure manner. Now, there's a number of elements here. You've got logins, you could apply 2-factor authentication. So there's various ways of providing some certainty that the end user is logging into their own account. Beyond that, we have seen some solutions where the users are asked to upload an ID or a photograph or some other asset at the beginning of the event, just to prove that, or add some extra security component. Now, the layers of beyond this are sometimes, they have ethical challenges. So we often engage with our partners closely to make sure we get this piece right. But the first one is a safe exam browser tool, which ensures that when you are working on your device, as you start an examination online, your internet is effectively locked and you're unable to utilize other browsers or other internet search channels. And probably the best solution to this, and the one that is employed for a number of our partners, is a proctoring or an invigilation solution, a digital proctoring solution. And we have a couple of partnerships that we've ran with. Ultimately, proctoring, there's some that are human proctoring. I know Mark will talk about shortly, even if you have a Zoom call that you call your teacher at the beginning of an exam with, or you can go down the path of some AI proctoring solutions, which some of you may have experienced before, where your webcams and your microphones are utilized on your device to ensure that you're not looking around or being coached or utilizing any other tools in the room to effectively cheat or to increase your ability to pass the exam. All of those are available, and it's about building the right package for the exam, for the circumstances of the exam, for our partners at the institution level, but also for the end users. And a lot of this takes time to bring the end users sometimes on side and ensure that they buy into the reasons for the package you're employing.
I see. Is that something you've had pushback with from end users then, as in students, isn't with some of your partners?
When we haven't had enough, when the time has been under pressure and you are not able to run mock exams and trial exams and give students enough time, end users, let's say, enough time to have a voice and share their concerns and unpack them and make sure they're well considered, then there has been some pushback in the fully proctored AI solution, and I'm sure others on this call will know about that. And in those cases where time has maybe not enabled us to show and tell and listen, we've maybe reduced the proctoring element and utilize some other methods. And I'm also interested in Mark Lynn's point around ensuring that your question and your examination design effectively delivers a secure model. So it's not all about the tech. You can also work on making sure that the questions themselves or the activities themselves do not lend themselves to being insecure or being exploited.
Okay, I'm going to ask Mark next about that. But firstly, just a point of note for those who aren't sure, AI proctoring, if I'm right, that is essentially sort of taking camera photos every 20-30 seconds. Is that right? Is that sort of an example of AI proctoring?
Yes. So a good example of this is if anyone has ever done any Pearson exams, they've had something similar to this before, and we have a partnership with the same solution. And the same for AWS exams. If you complete any of their online exams, effectively the camera and the microphone are active throughout the entire exam. And a good example would be if the camera perceives you to be looking consistently to one side or down or up, then you may be flagged as a potential cheat. And at the end of your examination, either you will be flagged to a human invigilator who may join a call with you directly and ask you to show the environment that you're working in, or your exam may just be flagged for a second reading or a second review to ensure that there wasn't any anomalies in what you submitted. All of those layers are available. And a lot of them, as I think are coming through on the comms here, you may be asked to show your environment before the exam commences. So as you've shown top, bottom, and all around to ensure that you're working in a secure environment.
Okay, right. Let's move on to Mark, because I'm interested to hear I know you've delivered. I think, Joey, I think you were saying 7,000 unique users have taken assessments via Catalyst, a DCU. But we were talking earlier. It's very much about enhancing a particular culture, isn't it, as well? So tell us how you've approached e-assessments and security issues as well.
Thank you, Amy. So just following on from Joey's comments there, we looked at it from a design perspective and worked on the approach of prevention is better than cure. So if we can design an assessment that would prevent or minimize the opportunity for plagiarism in the first place, that's a better approach than trying to detect them cheating. It's kind of like the horse is already bolted, so you're trying to fix something after it's broken, whereas if you stop it happening in the first place, you have a better chance of success. as several of the comments have came up in the margins, saying they have a problem with cheating. How do they know it's the right user? And all those other genuine challenges that they have. And as great as technology is, and I'm probably the biggest geek in the room when it comes to it, I would still put proper pedagogy and proper pedagogical design in front of technology every single day of the week. So structure your assessments, scaffold them, incorporate maybe the likes of video-based assessments, try reduce the amount of what we would call the exam hall, the stereotypical exam hall type scenarios, introduce elements where you can do, like what Jody said there, where students can be flagged if there's errors. You can introduce the possibility of vivas, online vivas, so real-time oral interviews with students afterwards if they are suspected, if a flag is raised. But that comes in at the very start in terms of assessment design and program and curriculum design. You can't introduce that at the very end and have a suspicion of assessment, because straight away you'll be hit with a lawsuit by our students saying, well, why are you victimizing me? What are you accusing me of? So you need to actually design your curriculum and design your assessment infrastructure to minimize plagiarism minimize opportunity for plagiarism in the first place.
So was this something that you'd been working on at DCU prior to COVID-19? Had you been trying to move into a sort of virtual assessment environment?
Yeah, so we've been working on this sort of preventative approach for a number of years now. What COVID has done is accelerated our adoption. We've received very positive feedback from staff and students that have engaged with it. But as you would have with every university, you will have people set in their ways and say, oh, that wouldn't work for my discipline, or I'd love to do it, but I don't have the time to engage with it. And now all of a sudden COVID has said, oh God, we need to engage with this. We need to redesign our assessments to facilitate this. So if anything, notwithstanding the devastation that COVID has caused, it has been a silver lining. The silver lining for us is getting the staff to focus on redesigning their assessment with a academic integrity viewpoint, you know.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's any upsides? I mean, you obviously do. You're trying to move the university, but what are the upsides of assessment via technology-led platforms as opposed to sitting with pen and paper?
There's so many. First of all, the pen and paper scenario, the sitting in exam hall, is not an authentic scenario. They don't do that in the workplace. They don't have a secluded environment where they're not allowed to look up stuff. They have to work on recall and everything. When they're out in the workplace, they can search a variety of different options open to them. They can be creative in their assessments or creative in their resources. So having an authentic assessment is a much better learning experience for students. So that's just from the pedagogy point of view. If we look at doing Joey mentioned Moodle. If you do an online quiz, for example, and people have this restrictive use thing, you can only do multiple choice quizzes. You can't. Moodle has a tremendous array of question types available for you. But when you do a quiz type, because you're doing it online, it automatically gives you a breakdown, a statistical analysis of the responses that students have given you. So it gives you as a teacher an insight into the students' learning. If you translate that to a pen and paper based test, when is a lecturer going to get the chance to analyze 500 or 600 exam papers, question by question, answer by answer, and then summarize them and then enable them to pass that on to the students? They're also able to give instant feedback to students, and it's well known, again, from a pedagogy point of view, the quicker you give feedback, the better the learning experience. And that's with quizzes. You could move on to other software platforms that the likes of Catalyst provide, like Mahara, which is an e-portfolio software, and where you then change your assessment design so that students become reflective learners. And again, from a pedagogy point of view, from a learning point of view, that is a better learning experience, proven time and time again. So all of that, and they're just two examples of where a technology can help. And there's tons more.
And I'm just interested, obviously you network with peers, I'm sure, in the higher ed community, and I'm interested, is this really sort of nascent, fresh thinking? Are lots of universities, do you think, right now trying to think about future-proofing the way they assess, or is it still quite traditional? What are your thoughts on that?
So there's what's known as a technology adoption curve, and it's typically a bell curve. So you will have early adopters on this side and people that will embrace technology and do all sort of brilliant, innovative teaching. Then you'll have people that don't know where the on switch is on the computer. So the two extremes. That bell curve, COVID has forced that bell curve to shift. And shift more towards people engaging with technology. You are still going to get that small percentage that will engage to a high extent with it, but you're getting more people engaging with technology and thinking about it. What I'd like to think, and I pride ourselves on DCU, traditionally we've had more of the innovative teaching in, if you're looking at a percentage term, I would say we've a higher percentage of innovative teaching than we would have in some of our counterparts in other universities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. No, I'd like to hear from you, Joey, too, on this point with the upsides of technology. Obviously, you don't just do assessment, you deliver essentially custom, bespoke LMS, and you have this whole Mahara credential solution. I mean, what do you think? But going back to my original question, which is what are the upsides? I mean, working hand in hand with university partners, what do you see the clear upsides are from your perspective?
There's a number, but the putting your data at your fingertips and learning insights from that in real time or close to real time manner is really enabled with some of the technology solutions and not so much in traditional paper-based exams. So our examination solution has, for example, a slider bar, which enables you to slide through 15-second increments because it stores 15-second increments in case of a power failure or an internet failure on the end user. But you can actually navigate with a sliding bar all the way through how that 3-hour examination was put together by that student. So not only are you able to understand, again, whether there was any cheating, copy pasting potentially taking place, but also you can see how they developed their response and how they developed their overall examination submission across a time period. And you can aggregate that up and look at, how a whole cohort may have responded to particular questions with ease, without significant data entry required to enable you to aggregate this data. Mark mentioned the grading flows. Students' work can be graded very quickly, automated if it's multiple choice, or in a myriad of settings for the teaching staff, trains, buses, at home, on tablets, and so on. So they're all very good. I mean, there's one here that really I mention a lot when I talk to universities, and no one ever wants to admit this, but nobody ever lost a digital exam paper. And the amount of exam papers that go missing at the back of an examination window, nobody will tell us how many they are, but there's a lot of looking at the floor when you raise the question. And it is very much the case that not only is a student's work saved every 15 seconds, but actually it's impossible to leave it on the bus.
Right. And also, I mean, just more broadly with your work through sort of Moodle and LMSs, do you find that faculty engage well when they have an LMS which delivers in terms of being able to track how students learn, engage, how engaged they are, how they like to learn? Do you think it's bringing up better ways of knowing how to adapt teaching?
Yes. I mean, at the heart of all of this, first and foremost, you need a stable and performant platform. If the system has any glitches, bugs, anomalies, errors, then actually engagement will fall away. It will be a negative experience, and actually you open up a bigger raft of problems, which is that you can't convince the horse to come to water, if that makes sense, in that, the technology is a turn off. So key to us is making sure that technology is robust, performant, and highly available. If that's the case, then we find that it doesn't take very long for people to, with the support of some of our team who are more on the pedagogical side, who can help consult people on how to apply the technology. One of them is on this feed, Sam here. That enables us to ensure that the tech isn't the answer. It's this marrying of your pedagogy, your examination or assessment or program design with the technology as a vehicle to deliver it and support it.
Okay.
And when you bring all of those together, I would challenge anyone to suggest that it doesn't beat hands down traditional methods that we should be moving away from.
So I'm going to bring you in here. I saw you nodding vigorously. I know Jess has been doing a lot of work about learning and teaching reimagined, working with some partners. I mean, tell us more about that. What are you seeing as sort of maybe new trends that will be adopted in education, or what are you finding in that research?
Well, we had started thinking about technology-enabled research, technology-enabled assessment before COVID hit. And one of the things that we do when an area emerges is decide whether the JISC will build something, build platforms, build a service, or whether we are not the expert and we will work with the experts to provide advice and guidance. So back in February, we developed 5 principles and targets for technology-enabled assessment for 2025. So before all of this, we'd started to think about it, and there are 5 principles within there. Then we started doing some work on teaching and learning reimagined as a result of COVID. And one of the areas that we looked at, again, was assessment. The most common area that we found and the most pressing challenges is balancing the security of lockdown and digitally proctored exams against the ability of students at home to access those, to access the technology, to access the connectivity, not least in the home circumstances where they might have not access to adequate devices, broadband, quiet spaces. So we have to build in that challenge as well. So this is a balance that is a problem that lies at the heart of digital assessment. It's not, and that's what we're trying to think about for the future under that teaching and learning reimagined space.
I need to come to you here, Mark, because I know we discussed this earlier, but you explained that you had chosen not to use a remote proctoring service, and that was precisely because of this. But tell us yourself, why did you decide not to use remote proctoring?
Yeah, and that's not for 1 second to be giving out or be critical of the excellent products that exist already, and I don't mean to be critical of any university or institution that's using them. However, we pride ourselves on the level of access students, the number of access students we have. So students that come from a disadvantaged background, students that come from a non-traditional university background. We have a problem then in terms of accessibility. If we end up using a proctoring service, and if a student, as was the case in COVID, where a student is at home, doesn't have the flexibility to go to an exam center where there's high-tech solutions, high-tech hardware there, well, what do we do if they don't have a webcam? Or what if they do if they don't have strong enough sort of power within their computer to actually facilitate this? Do we exclude them from doing the exam? Absolutely no way. We just couldn't do that at all. Ethically, it wouldn't be correct. And then as another member of the audience there said something about, well, what's stopping them opening a second device or a third device and looking at it? There are ways you can pick holes in these things. So we decided to be more proactive and said, right, rather than putting that extra stress on students of saying, yes, you must have a Zoom call open at the same time and your face is being tracked every 30 seconds or 15 seconds. I know plenty of students who are parents where the computer they're using during COVID was in their kitchen or was in their dining room. So they're going to have their kids walking by their screen, or their husbands or wives or anything else along those lines. Or they poor broadband and their signal drops halfway through the exam. Are they cheating? Or are they just got poor broadband? So we work on the basis that our students are innocent until proven guilty, as opposed to the other way around, where some of the technology platforms and providers will immediately assume that they're guilty first. We trust students, and that's important.
And can you explain a bit more for those listening who probably want to maybe emulate what your DCU is doing? I mean, how do you build the design of assessments then to see students using their knowledge and in a way which means they can't essentially cheat? Okay,
so it's definitely a partnership project. So a partnership between staff and students, and indeed a 3-way partnership between the institution, the staff and the students. And I do make a distinction between the staff and the institution, because there would be policies in place, there would be supports in place, and an individual lecturer can't actually do them by themselves. And there might even be, as we have in DCU, partnerships with some providers like Catalyst that provide that technical infrastructure and the reliability to have that in place in order for the lecturers to engage with it. As Joey touched on earlier on, if the technology doesn't work, the staff or students won't have faith in it, so won't embrace it. So for us to have that reliable infrastructure is crucial, is number one. We would see the LMS as a bus rather than a Ferrari, and as much as people will come along with this, a very expensive, shiny, classy looking piece of technology that you'd compare to a Ferrari, that will only accommodate a small portion of staff, a small portion of students, and is not expandable throughout. We want a reliable bus that will take everybody on board, and we'll work on upgrading the bus and pimping it up over time. But it needs to work. It needs to get us from A to B over that time period. And for us, then it became, once that was in place, it became a challenge of changing mindsets rather than skill sets, and working with staff to redesign their assessments, not to be critical of them, but to show them research-informed practice. Some of the great resources that are produced by JISC, absolutely, the principles document that were put up there, the accessibility documents that JISC have done, all of that work has been absolutely superb and research informed, and we pass that back to our staff and provide that environment, that supportive environment for our staff, where it's okay to be innovative and it's okay to think outside the box. And yet there might be faults with it along the way, but when you do it in partnership with students, they'll forgive those faults, and as a matter of fact, they will embrace them and help you make it better for the next time.
Okay, that's interesting. So actually requiring innovation from all your staff then, in terms of making them rethink about the way they test and what they ask students to demonstrate.
An example that I'll give you is we had a number of lecturers come to us and a number of students come to us and say, I'm having a problem with standing up in front of the class and giving a presentation. Yet the learning outcomes said you must have good communication skills and you must do whatever. So a presentation was deemed the best way to assess that learning outcome. And of course, you can't plagiarize in that because you have to stand up in front of the class and have that knowledge and so on. But there were students petrified at doing it, and they had this, what you'd call performance anxiety. And then, of course, all you were testing was their ability to hold their nerve rather than their knowledge of the content. So what we did was we introduced technology to manage and to facilitate a video platform so students can record themselves on their mobile phone and easily transfer it to the VLE and submit it to the assignment. In order to replicate that classroom scenario, of course, you would have, as we had in the case, a staff member could play that video and then ask questions of the students afterwards. And it's not a performance that they're after, it is their knowledge and their ability to interpret and reflect on their learning. And we made it easy through Catalyst, through Moodle, and through a video platform we have called Unicam to capture a practical demonstration skill, in this case presentation, could have been a clinical skill, a nursing, an engineering skill, a science skill, but capture it on our mobile phone in a controlled environment and then submit it out as an assessment. And as one of the clinical skills, we actually hooked it up and we did peer assessment where student A, Mary, would record her friend Frances doing the video, and they would comment on the video, and then they said, right, are you happy to submit that? Yes, I am. And they'll make that submission. So they end up learning from one another. So it's assessment for learning as well as assessment of learning. And we just use the technology to facilitate that.
Really interesting. Thank you. Another quick question. I mean, right now, is anybody on campus? I guess it's summer now, but I mean, was anybody on campus? And are you anticipating international students, for example, coming back in September or not?
So we're, I suppose, again, no more than anybody else on this call, we're really affected by COVID. We've over 20% of our students are international students. So they may be stuck in their own country, or indeed they may be in a country that we're not allowing them come back into our organization. So we are, for all of our students, we are aiming for an online first scenario, that we're thinking online first, and that includes assessment. And that's the way we're driving it. Yes, there will be campus-based activities, but we're designing our curriculum around the fact that you will not be disadvantaged if you cannot get to Glasnevin campus, St. Patrick's campus, or All Hallows campus.
Great. Okay, thank you. I'm going to have a quick look at our questions coming in. I can see we've got quite a few. Okay, I'm just going to ask the most popular one, which is speaking tests can be proctored, but can you please explain how to proctor a written exam? So I'm going to come to you first, Joey, for that.
Yeah, so our exam solution that we've developed, and we did this in partnership with Monash over the past 2 years. It was not driven by COVID. It's just that actually COVID has provided the perfect scenario where its strengths really shine. It includes all manner of traditional examination activities, question types, if you like, or methods. Monash have moved to a 100% online examination model. They do not have any traditional paper-based or oral spoken to and individual examinations at all. And this proctoring question was a big part of it. Now, there's a number of pieces. Firstly, the solution itself enables you to long answer or essay style question types, and as I've mentioned a minute ago, from 15-second snapshots, you can easily see how they developed their long answer, how they put down their 3,000 or 4,000 word submission, for example. It has the ability to do highlight, take notes, flag a question, come back later, all the sort of things you'd expect to do in a traditional paper-based exam if you were sitting at a desk. The proctoring, particularly if you go the full AI path, it observes a number of different components about the way in which you're engaging with the examination. So it firstly watches your machine to ensure that you're not trying to browse on the web in some other browser, or that you're not trying to do anything else. It's AI based, will also sit and watch your head movements and your audio through microphone. And there's a number of other probes you can do. So if you're being coached by another person in the room, you will be flagged. If you have notes between your legs that you keep looking down at, you will be flagged. If you have notes stuck to the ceiling that you keep looking up at, you will be flagged. It will observe why your eyes keep leaving the screen and why they keep appearing to essentially where you've stashed your notes off view. They are pretty robust. They probably flag more frequently than less frequently. So they probably flag more potential cheat scenarios than falling short, if I'm honest. And you can turn the resolution and the sort of, the strength of that AI flag up and down.
And what would Monash do then in an example where a student is flagged?
So we have a couple of different proctoring partnerships. One, and it depends how far you wish to take the proctoring solution. In this case, the first example is that actually you could have at the end of your examination submission or the session, the screen will have a human at the proctoring partner pop on screen and ask you to show your environment. To show what you kept looking at between your legs. They will ask you, why did you keep looking to the left-hand side? Why could we hear audio playing that was coaching you through? If that is not the level of service or sort of proctoring solution you want, then it may just flag your exam to the assessors and to the graders and to the teaching staff that there was some potential that you were cheating, and it will note what that flag picked up. And in that case, maybe the assessor needs to take extra scrutiny into their grading and to their assessment of that to ensure that it was your own. Mark mentioned another one earlier in that you can run all of these exams on Catalyst examination solution. You can push them straight through multiple plagiarism detectors, which just do text matching or even prose and writing style matching. So there's a gold or platinum level offering, and it's about getting the package and the balance right for our partners at the institutions and for the end users and their unique, very unique in many cases, situations.
Okay. Mark, I want to quickly ask you about this sort of culture of cheating or plagiarism, and how prevalent you think it is, because we once wrote about the issue of fraud among the international student population, particularly. And what was very interesting, which came out in this article, was that the international students are bona fide and have genuine intent and determination to succeed. And sometimes they are likely to they might consider plagiarism because they're so desperate to get an A grade, not because they want a grade that reflects their ability. They just have this sort of culture of, you must be 100%. I mean, I just wonder if you have anything to add around this sort of how in international and then maybe domestic settings, are people inclined to cheat if they can, or do you think actually it's generally not something which most students actually consider, particularly outside? I mean, yeah, just like to hear your thoughts as sort of more of an expert than I.
Flattery will get you everywhere. So I'll draw a distinction between plagiarism, or at least I'll divide it in two, where I'll say some will plagiarize out of ignorance and others will plagiarize out of malice. And it's the malice, the ones that are doing it purposely, they to me are the cheaters. If you're doing it out of ignorance, as in you don't know how to reference properly or you don't know how to paraphrase properly, I would put them in a different category. I'm not saying that I would excuse that side of plagiarism, but I would work on the basis of trying to educate the students, ideally in advance, to minimize that happening. That said, I think that there are ways in which you can minimize those people cheating. And I'm going to borrow a theory from business and from fraud in business, because to me that's what cheating is fraud. And I'm going to borrow a theory called the Cressman fraud triangle. And it says there's three elements, three influences, three factors that facilitate fraud, facilitate cheating. There's pressure, there's rationalization, right? And I'm just forgetting the third one here. Now it'll come back to me now in a second. But with the pressure is if we are putting all of the exams all at once, if we are putting a huge amount of pressure on students, you mentioned international students, they pay higher fees. They have huge family expectations for them to succeed. If we can reduce that pressure, we will reduce the size of that triangle, i.e. the size of them to cheat, right? Rationalization, if we can, some students will plagiarize because they think, and I'll use international students as an example, it's well documented that they would say, well, it's the right thing to quote an expert because they're the expert. Who am I to give my opinion when the expert has already given the opinion? So what we need to do then is to explain to them the difference between poor paraphrasing and cheating, and explain to them how to paraphrase properly. And that also helps reduce the rationalization. But then with the cheaters, we want to remove the rationalization or reduce that, where they'll say, oh, sure, everybody does it. Or, sure, I'm not going to get caught. What harm is it going to be? So what we have done is we've worked very strongly with the student union body in the university to ensure the students aren't accepting their peers cheating. That's crucial. They're not facilitating their peers in cheating. I've done huge PR campaigns around that, and indeed had an entire academic integrity week last year where students had this declaration wall talking about cheating and why it was wrong and why they shouldn't do it, and complimenting the university on their doing it. And thanks Sam's after putting in the other one there. Other point of the triangle is opportunity. So there's rationalization, there's pressure and opportunity. If we can reduce the opportunity for them to cheat, a lot of staff would have the same assessment year on year on year. So of course they're going to look at other assessments that were done. So change the assessment, modify it, customize it, allow them to have choice involved in it, give them ownership. All of those things will reduce the opportunity for cheating. And that way, and brilliantly facilitated by technology, but it's led by pedagogy.
Right, yeah.
You know?
Really fascinating about the whole culture and structure. Great, let's move to another question. Most next most popular from Meredith McGregor. What are your top 3 principles for assessment design to minimize cheating? So I guess we're looking for a handy top 3 here. So, I mean, you've essentially outlined one there, which is completely changed structure and culture. But what would you say were your top 3? Shall I come to you first, Joey?
I'm possibly not the best person here, but I think from our perspective, the first and foremost, you need to ensure that the questions give the opportunity for the student to be creative and innovative in their response, and to put down, in my experience, there is a significant element in examination design which depends upon rote learning, and it is not very effective in both developing positive learning experiences for the end user, but also it doesn't necessarily demonstrate that you are thinking creatively, or that you are you have learned anything other than how to cram study last night before your examination. And multiple choice exercises can unfortunately quite often sort of fall straight into this trap, particularly around the fact that myself, as an example, some multiple choice examinations are quite easy to reverse engineer. And so if you're not considering an examination question or an assessment model that enables the end users to be creative and innovative in their responses and in their submission, I'm not sure that you are, and I might be being very crude here, sorry, I'm not sure that you're effectively assessing learning. You're assessing the ability to recall information, remember information, and ultimately game or reverse engineer an answer out of maybe other techniques that you pick up. That's probably the biggest one for me, is just ensure that the overall approach you're taking suits the subject matter and is not just asking the student to rote learn, which is where we see the biggest failures in engagement quite often.
Okay, thanks. Mark, anything to add?
Yeah, I would say I'd agree with everything that Joey said, but I'd add to that authentic assessments. When you make assessments authentic, real, they're harder to cheat. I would also say that if you can personalize the assessments and ask the students to personally reflect on their experience, or indeed have an element of choice within the assessment, that also is incredibly useful for them. And I would also scaffold your assessment, so one assessment builds on the other. Far too often we have no links between assessment 1 and assessment 2 within the one module, or again, even more prevalent is where we have no links between modules, so they can't take their learning from semester 1 into semester 2. You do an essay, for example, and in semester 1, and the lecturer gives you extensive feedback on the essay and how to structure it and how to prepare it, and then you're never asked to do an essay again. So how can you implement the feedback that you've given? So then as a result, students don't pay attention to the feedback, and then that's a vicious circle that goes on. So scaffold assessments, link them to one another, and allow a student to build and grow.
Great, thank you. I think I could become a testing expert now. It's all about scaffolding and culture and structure. Right, let's go to another question. We've got quite a few here. I'm just trying to see. Another one from here from Payman Bolori. The problem with multiple choice exams are that they're very easy to score. The more open options, performance-based exams, take a lot longer to score. What would be your recommendation to mitigate the excessive time to score such tests? So I think the question really here is, how can technology smooth that particular pain point?
We see a lot of this, actually. The first thing to point out is that we did an assessment with we asked some students a question in our Monash partnership. You know, when was the last time that you were actually asked to sit down and write for 3 hours in pen? And they said, never. That's never, ever happened. And it just didn't seem right. Now, that was going to effectively be their stage gate into the professional world. That was setting them up for life. And it was a completely unrealistic scenario they were being asked to perform within. Similar to the staff side of things there, and Mark talked about a change curve. we had a lot of resistance, and I will call it resistance, nervousness about changing the traditional model of picking up 60 papers and walking home and bringing them in and out with your car, and you've got 2 weeks to grade them, and you've gone through 3 boxes of red pens and all that kind of stuff. Firstly, I don't think that the technology necessarily changes the fact that if you're doing long answer essay style questions, you've got to read them and grade them and assess them. But I do think that having it potentially tucked on a small tablet or a device which is portable and easily transferable and can be carried around with you is hugely beneficial. It makes it much easier for you to dip in and out, pick it up, put it down, and actually engage in the spare moments you get in the day. The other thing is grading rubrics. Anybody who's ever been a teacher will know that very quickly you start to use the same 5 feedback statements over and over again, and to the point where actually you're using them wrong. 30 minutes in and you're starting to put the wrong feedback scrawl in a red pen. And the people who get graded their papers at the beginning of your assessment, of your grading flow in hour 1, get a much deeper and better feedback response than the people who you grade at the end of your 8 hours of grading. I do think the technology can help to bring normalization and standardization forward with things like rubrics, and a selection of statements or responses which are clearly tied to a grade or a result. So you can't say excellent, well done, you've done really well, and give a close to fail grade, for example. Your feedback statement needs to be more reflective and closer to actually the mark, pass, fail, whatever your grading matrix might be, and rubrics can help with that. Beyond that, the technology can also just generally make a staff member or an assessor's life easier and faster for marking up submission papers, highlighting, commentary, and so on. Most people feel that it doesn't until they try it, and then most people after the first run will say, I never want to go back.
Okay, that is good to hear. Esther, I want to bring you in. Sorry, I haven't put you in for a while, but a more general question to you, given that you work across the whole education sector, when you see resistance or come across sort of slowness to adapt to using technology, do you think in general the obstacles are faculty, staff? Is it investment? Is it having a sort of champion cheerleader? What do you think, if it's somebody who's listening as an institution and they're thinking, I really want to adapt all this change and I might hit a brick wall, what do you think are the problems and ways to overcome them?
I think there's a couple of things. In adoption, the whole issue that's been raised here of digital skills and capabilities of students and staff, that's really been brought to the fore, I think, by COVID. And we've done a lot of work in that area in the UK about our own staff and students and how we can assess that regularly, their digital skills, but also then how we develop those. And we've got some really good tools that are available to do that. I think I wanted to talk a tiny bit about international students in particular, and I don't think I think there are more fundamental challenges about knowledge and data. We don't know a lot of the things about international students. One of the things that's really surprised me is UK universities don't know where their students are at the start of COVID. They didn't know what country they were in, what access they had to devices, to broadband, whether there are technological problems in those international students gaining access, what the student experience is like, and what their well-being is like. We can't ignore well-being, and I think the whole isolation problem that people are experiencing is just compounded by being an international student. And as we said right at the beginning, international students are so important for our economies. So we need to get that knowledge and data for those international students and support them in the same way as we would any student.
So, and you don't think there is enough of a understanding about the sort of mental well-being aspect of learning remote, that being better approached?
We're starting to look at well-being issues, but one of the things that was being brought up in our recent sort of survey work across the sector is students don't want us to focus on their well-being because they're at home or because of their domestic circumstances. They want us more to focus about their well-being because of anxiety caused about their delivering their courses or access to courses. So they want us to take that root cause away before they think about domestic situations. So we're starting to look at that in a lot more detail. We've only done 6 weeks of this work, so that will certainly be a focus.
Great. We'll definitely come back and find out more as that research pans out. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left, so I'm just going to see if we can fit in another question or two. Question from Carol Schock, which is a question about lack of skills to use technology relating to operating online and available Wi-Fi. This is problematic in different places around the world. Even in Canada, there are issues with Zoom, for example. So how would you, Joey, I mean, what do you advise your clients? How do they sort that problem out?
Yeah, so again, it does need to be considered case by case, and it absolutely is probably the most significant consideration that needs to be made. Inclusion, accessibility, the exam solution and how to deliver it, invigilate it, proctor it, and assess it and provide feedback, that is a solved problem. But there will always be a new challenge in the accessibility space. There's a couple of things that we have done. And there's actually a second question from Carol in this that is relevant here. Are we giving people enough time to come on board and come up to speed with what we're proposing or what we're changing? And that's really key. For Monash and for the relationship there that has been developing and driving forward with this over 2 years now, yes, there's been a lot of gentle rollouts, test phases, bringing different scenarios forward, solving them piece by piece. In actual fact, Monash's e-assessment solution, which I mentioned is 100% online now, was not to be delivered at distance in its initial run. It was to still sit in an exam hall. It was just to be done on 2,000 laptops, all on tables, for the benefit of saving trees and for the benefit of not losing papers and all the other things I talked about earlier. When COVID came along, the solution was ready-made, but the time which we had with Concordia in Canada and with Dublin City to get the buy-in and to run all of those scenarios and make sure we weren't excluding anybody in what we proposed was 5 weeks. And actually that made our decisions around this very different. So, proctoring was reduced or relaxed or removed. Various other elements that would have mandated the end users needed to have the latest technology or the fastest internet connections was relaxed and removed. And we had to look at the time available to us and look at how much we could do to bring people on side and ensure that we were being inclusive. If that 5 weeks had been 15 weeks, we probably could have got quite a lot more testing done and onboarding, on-siding done to ensure that we were being fully inclusive. And to the crux of the problem, yes, in some scenarios, if you wanted a fully online assessment model, then you would potentially have to consider some local testing stations or some infrastructure that users who don't have suitable infrastructure at home can utilize in their local areas. And that kind of stuff can be solved. Many nations, your local libraries or your local town halls or various other places might have pretty good connections that you could utilize, but you just need time, and you need to make sure you've considered all of that and built it into a package that not only, I think the major thing here is your students and your staff should never walk into this examination model on day one for the first time in a real life scenario. That's an utter disaster, and we would never ever really let that happen. So it must be well considered and well planned and well thought out, and you can't necessarily solve every one of those accessibility problems. You have to be quite flexible and adaptive. Thank
you. And another quick question from me. Do you think this is one of the big challenges of the next 12 months? Universities working out if they are going to, the travel ban, there are spikes happening all around the world. It looks like students may decide not to travel and continue to study online for the next term. Do you think this is one of the big pressing challenges in terms of how to continue to I mean, as you said, Esther, engage with them and make sure they're significantly supported, but also to check their learning progress?
Yes. There's a head in the sand scenario I'm playing a little bit in some areas. It'll be okay in September. We'll just come back in week 3 in September and it'll all be fine by then. And I think that, we all really know that is not the case. And then there's, for the UK and Ireland and some other European countries in particular, and I'm sure that North America is the same, the international student enrollment is a significant and very, very important factor in the overall business model of the university and higher ed sector today. And retaining that and ensuring that it can be retained, but also that you are retaining it and delivering value and delivering a good product in your education package, and that the end user is not, if I'm honest, being ripped off by effectively still paying what they used to pay, but is unable to come to campus and is unable to engage with their teacher face to face. Technology really is the only solution to those problems, and it's right there. However, some universities are, let's call them traditional, and they move slowly. And I do think that they are going to be forced to make some decisions quicker than they normally would. These technologies are not new. They've been there for 5-10 years. Nobody's adopted them. People still hire the local football club, for example, and put 2,000 tables in it, and that's where they do their examinations. That is now looking more archaic than ever.
Yeah, thank you. Very good point. And I really has come through for me that how the thoughtful use of technology can really empower students. We are at time, so I'm just going to ask Mark and Esther to make a few final points. Thank you so much, Joey, for that. Great point to end on from you. Mark, what would you like people to take away from this webinar? Would be sort of your key takeaway?
I'd like to, if you don't mind, have 2. One is lead with pedagogy, lead with design, that, because if technology is first, that automatically means teaching is at least second, which is what you don't want to happen. But the second point, if I might be as cheeky to include one in there, is your institution must invest in the technology. You can't do this on a shoestring. You can't do this and then go blame it on the technology when the technology doesn't work if you haven't put the investment in. The LMS, for example, in our case, Moodle, is the one piece of technology that everybody touches. Absolutely every student touches the LMS at some stage, and institutions don't invest in it, and they have this image that the LMS is dead and it's a myth from God knows how long ago. A properly invested, properly supported LMS and supporting the staff in the use of the LMS is vital, absolutely vital.
Thank you so much. Esther, final thoughts from you. And I also had wanted to ask you what you're most excited about in terms of new tech you're thinking as well, but a few final points from you.
The final points, I think, is just building on what we've just been saying there. It's about organisations need to really have a cross-organisational approach. The digital strategy's got to join up with the teaching and learning strategy, which has to join up with the international strategy and the IT strategy. You really have to work across your organisation to get this to work, and do it now. We need to really invest don't need to invest now in the physical estate, but the digital estate. That's going to be the most important. In terms of what's most exciting, just before lockdown, I was lucky enough to be with about 15 chief executives of research and education networks like our own at JISC in LA, and we attended Dreamscape, which is part of the DreamWorks group, and we had a virtual reality experience on how to train your dragon, some of you might know about. Now, we talked quite a lot there about how a virtual reality course content could be developed, and that would have to be truly global to be able to invest in that. Why would you have a student walking through the streets of Rome in one country, whereas we could develop this as a global approach? There's no need to be any different. So I think that whole use of virtual reality was really pretty mind-blowing.
Great, thank you. Thank you everyone for staying with us, for everyone still I can see still online. Thanks for staying with us. We are just past the hour, so I'd like to thank again my panelists, Mark Glynn, Joey Morrison, and Esther Wilkinson. Thank you for joining me, and see you at the next webinar. Goodbye.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.